Hello! Today we are extracting from Bushmasters. This is Lachesis muta, or some people prefer to pronounce it Lachesis muta. Either way is fine. This is the longest pit viper species in the world. The record length is approaching 12 feet. That's certainly not common for them to be that long, but you can still see these are quite large animals. Our biggest ones are probably over about 6 feet, between 6 and 7, I would say right now. We don't usually bother to measure them exactly, but it gives you an idea of how big they are. And I'll just try to talk through what's happening on this video and give a little explanation of each one as we go. So these snakes are pretty well loved by many people because they're big, they're obviously beautiful snakes with pretty amazing patterns, and they have some really cool features that are just kind of fun to see, and hopefully I'll be able to point a couple out. Actually, right here, you can see the way the skin underneath the eye folds up as the snake opens its mouth. And that's there to actually protect the snake from the prey. So when it bites onto its food, if the prey is trying to bite back or struggle, then that flap of skin folds up and will actually protect the snake's eye from getting injured, which is just a pretty cool thing. You can kind of see it here, though Jim's finger is a little bit in the way. You may see some venom kind of getting caught in the fang sheath as each one goes by. That does happen a little bit sometimes. It's not anything that's going to hurt the snake or be a big problem. It does mean that we might not get all of that venom if some of it stays stuck in the fang sheath, but we do try to prevent that from happening or try to get the fang to become completely exposed, and that way the venom will come out. But sometimes it's just a little bit caught on the end of the fang for whatever reason, and so, you know, Jim's not going to reach his finger down there to expose the fang, so that just happens sometimes. I will say that these particular snakes seem to be doing pretty well with our extraction schedule. So they're currently extracted from every 2 weeks. When we first acquired these snakes and began extracting from them, we put them on a longer rotation. There's a lot of information out there that discusses how easily stressed Bushmasters can be, how delicate they are, and these are all snakes that were captive born here in the United States, so none of these were wild caught. And we found that they actually tolerate the extractions really well. There's that skin fold again, you can really see it in this one. And they've been doing just fine. They eat like voraciously, and overall they seem relatively calm. They're fairly easy to work with despite their large size. I will agree with Jim when he complains a little bit about this particular pinning setup. This box is probably a little bit small for them. We'll be getting a bigger box at some point, but this is what's been set up in this building. Luckily, because they're relatively calm, we haven't really had too much trouble with them slipping out of the box or trying to flip around. They usually, as you can see, are relatively calm, even when he's going to pin them to pick them up. The largest ones that we have are going on about 6 to 7 years old now, and then these smaller ones, like this size right here, these are about 4 years old now. So they're not quite as large. They're still big, impressive snakes even when they're not gigantic, but these are a little bit younger than the other ones. So I mentioned that the snakes we have are Lachesis muta. There are a few other species in this genus. So muta is the South American Bushmaster. And you might have heard of a subspecies, the Atlantic Bushmaster, which really is questionable whether or not that exists, but muta has the largest range of the Bushmasters. It's found in essentially equatorial rainforests that are east of the Andes Mountains. So they have a pretty big range, especially in Brazil. And then the other species are Lachesis stenophrys, which is the Central American bushmaster, Lachesis melanocephala, which is the black-headed bushmaster that's just found in a very small region on the Pacific coast of Costa Rica. And then also Lachesis archicorda, which is the Chacoan bushmaster. And it's basically found if you think of the part of South America that touches Central America where they meet. So Western Panama and then coastal regions in Colombia and Northwest Ecuador. So, interestingly enough, despite there being a few species, the venom is actually fairly conserved between the different species. And that means that there really isn't a lot of variation between the different species, that the venom is relatively similar. And that's a good thing, because that means that the antivenoms that come from the various places in Central and South America that work for bushmasters actually will probably work for any bushmaster species, which that makes it a little bit easier for those of us who are maintaining them in captivity for whatever reason. Bushmasters are very feared snakes, especially by people who live in the regions where the snakes are found. However, they don't cause a lot of bites. So in Brazil, the estimates are somewhere around 2% or less of all snake bites are from bushmasters. So that's a very small percentage. And snakes in the Bothrops genus or rattlesnakes also cause a lot more bites than bushmasters do. However, bushmasters are very feared. And the reason for that is because their bites can be extremely severe. Not because their venom is super duper toxic or it's more toxic than those others. It's actually probably less toxic than most rattlesnake and lancehead venoms in the region. But they can inject a large quantity of venom. And symptoms can be very similar to other lanceheads or other pit vipers. So they can cause myonecrosis, pain and swelling at the bite site, hemorrhage, coagulopathy. But in addition, bushmaster bites can cause what's kind of referred to as a vagal response. And that's a more systemic, like vague things going wrong sort of symptoms or group of symptoms that can occur. And these occur not always, but with more severe envenomations. So examples of that sort of symptoms are heavy sweating, nausea and vomiting, and also diarrhea, low blood pressure and a lowered heart rate, uncoordination or the inability to walk well, and also a complete loss of consciousness. So obviously, if you're experiencing those things after a bite, that's going to be very scary and disorienting in addition to the pain you're already experiencing. So certainly can understand why people would be afraid of a bite from this snake. I don't know if you could tell that the venom was kind of squirting upwards or sideways out of the fangs. That's probably because it was hitting the glass funnel there and ricocheting off of it. It was just interesting. I had to mention it. Anyway, you can see that we maintain these guys in these large, kind of fancy drawers. The larger ones are 6 feet long, and then there's 2 slightly smaller versions. And I really like these for these snakes for a couple of reasons. The first reason is just that it makes it very easy for us to access them. They're nice, roomy, good-sized enclosures. But then the other thing that I really like is they have very good ventilation because the top is a kind of, well, depending on which system it is, it's either kind of a high quality mesh or a piece that has a lot of holes, like a metal piece with a lot of holes punched in it. So the airflow is quite good. And it also is large enough for me to provide a range of humidity in the enclosure. So I use a cocoa bark and sometimes sphagnum mix on the water side of the enclosure, and they are misted almost daily. There's some exceptions to that I'll get into in a minute, but they're misted very frequently, and that side of the enclosure is kept damp. They also have a wet hide, which is sphagnum moss inside of some sort of little container that the snake can crawl into. We cut a hole in the container. It has a lid on it so the snake can crawl in there if they'd like to, so they can have an even higher humidity at that point. And then we have a heated, drier side, and that is typically cypress in that area, cypress mulch. And then there is a heat pad underneath each individual enclosure when they need to be a little bit warmer. And I would say they spend about 95% of their time on the cooler, more damp side or in the hide boxes. That is almost always where you find them. And sometimes they are out crawling around, or every once in a while they are also sitting on the heat. But that is not something they spend a lot of time doing. They really prefer to be much more cool. And even though they're found close to the equator, you may think, oh, they're going to be hot all the time. But the way that they use their habitat, they are able to stay cool. So they spend a lot of time, essentially all of their time, on the forest floor. So the humidity is going to be higher there. And they're very good at utilizing shade or underground or under like root systems, areas to stay cool. This is just a shot to demonstrate how they are able to move their fangs and how they can be on the outside of the snake's jaw. So if finger placement is off by a little bit, the snake can easily stick a fang into anything that's in contact with the loose skin on its lower jaw. And lastly, in this video, we're very excited. Here you can see an example of the wet hide with the lid off. We were very excited to get some eggs this year. As far as we know, this might be the first breeding of these snakes while they are producing venom and being extracted from on a regular, ongoing basis. So certainly it's not the first breeding in captivity. As I mentioned before, these are captive-born snakes to begin with, so there are people breeding them, but here, just to show, this is the same female that laid the eggs, giving venom. So she was extracted from throughout the period of time that they were breeding, and also throughout the period of time where she was incubating the eggs and then laying them. I think that the extraction that occurred just before laying, I was suspicious that she might have eggs and be close. She had skipped a meal, and so we did give her that extraction off. But other than that, I don't think she missed any of them. I did cool these snakes down fairly significantly when I paired them and had the male in with the female. I turned the heat off for a period of time, and this was over the winter in Kentucky, so the building itself was still heated, but I did turn off any of the supplemental heat on the enclosures where I had the snakes paired. And that was a hope to mimic the cool and dry conditions that seem to encourage or cause these snakes to breed in the wild. And we were very excited. The snake laid 4 eggs, and all 4 of the eggs hatched. So here you can see the babies on their hatching day. Aren't they adorable? And we expect, obviously we took them out of the egg box, and they are currently set up with damp sphagnum and a lot of misting because they are opaque right now. Here we are putting them into that aquarium, and they will be left together here until they shed for the first time. We don't know a lot about Bushmaster breeding in the wild. We do know that the female stays with the eggs until they hatch, and possibly for a while afterwards. That would be consistent with other pit viper species, at least some of them. This is one of the very few egg-laying pit vipers. Most of them do have birth of live young, but the kind of hanging out with the babies for a while is pretty consistent with other species. So we didn't feel confident letting the eggs incubate with mom, but we do want to leave the babies together until they shed for the first time. It seems likely that that's a thing that happens in the wild. We tend to do that with our rattlesnake clutches. And so that's our plan. As of this recording, they have not shed yet, so I've just been misting them and keeping an eye on them, and they seem to be very happily resting together. And once they shed, then we will start offering them food.
Thank you for watching. Remember to like and subscribe for more KRZ videos, and don't forget to hit the bell so you know when it's happening. Follow us on social media at KY Reptile Zoo for more scaly content. Lastly, come visit us in Slade, Kentucky, and check out our website at kyreptilezoo.com for merch and booking programs. See ya!